This week isn't just big, it's game-changing. General Hospital.
The morning sun rose slowly over the waterfront of Port Charles, casting a warm golden glow across the city that had seen decades of triumph, heartbreak, and scandal. On this particular day, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Residents gathered in the town square, reporters prepared their cameras, and city officials lined the steps of City Hall. It was Inauguration Day. After months of campaigning, debates, and public appearances, Willow was set to officially become the city's new mayor. Her campaign had been built on three simple promises: reform, transparency, and compassion. For many citizens, Willow represented a fresh start for a city that had been tangled in political games and questionable leadership for years. But beneath the hopeful atmosphere, whispers lingered. Rumors about Willow's past had circulated quietly during the campaign. Nothing concrete had ever surfaced, and her supporters dismissed the claims as political smears. Still, a few skeptics remained uneasy. As the clock struck 11, a hush fell over the crowd. The master of ceremonies stepped forward and welcomed everyone to the historic event. Flags waved gently in the breeze, and applause echoed through the square as Willow stepped toward the podium. She wore a confident smile, waving to supporters who had come out in large numbers. Among the crowd stood many familiar faces from Port Charles. Michael Corinthos watched proudly near the front, his expression full of hope. For him, Willow's victory symbolized a new chapter, both for the city and for their future together. Nearby, Drew Kane stood with his arms crossed, his expression far more serious. Unlike the cheering crowd, Drew looked tense, his eyes scanning the stage as if he were waiting for something. Not far away stood a small girl clutching the edge of the barricade. Scout Kane shifted nervously on her feet. She looked out of place among the journalists and political supporters, yet there was determination in her eyes. She had been struggling all morning with a secret she didn't know how to carry. Back on stage, Willow began her speech. "My fellow citizens of Port Charles," she said warmly, her voice echoing through the microphone. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for our city. Together, we will rebuild trust, restore transparency, and create a future where every voice is heard." Applause erupted. Willow paused, smiling graciously as cameras flashed. "For too long," she continued, "our city has been divided by mistrust. My administration promises honesty, accountability, and compassion for every resident. That's not true." The sudden voice cut through the celebration like thunder. The crowd gasped. All eyes turned toward the source. Standing near the front barricade, Scout had raised her hand. Her small voice trembled, but she stood her ground. Willow blinked in confusion. "Excuse me?" she asked, attempting to maintain composure. Scout stepped forward slightly. "You're lying," she said loudly. "You stole money from the city." The square fell completely silent. Reporters instinctively lifted their cameras. Michael's smile vanished instantly. On stage, Willow's expression froze. Security guards began moving toward Scout, but Drew suddenly stepped forward from the crowd. "Wait," he said firmly. The tension in the air grew thick. Scout looked up at the stage, gathering courage. "I heard you," she said, her voice shaking but determined. "You were on the phone last week. You said you moved the money so nobody would find out." Murmurs spread rapidly through the crowd. Willow's heartbeat pounded in her ears. "That's ridiculous," she replied quickly. "This is a misunderstanding. She's just a child. She's telling the truth." The new voice came from Drew. All heads turned again. Drew slowly approached the stage steps, holding a thin folder in his hand. His expression was grim, his usual calm demeanor replaced by something far more serious. "I didn't want this to happen today," Drew said, his voice heavy. "But the truth can't wait any longer." Michael stared at him in disbelief. "Drew, what are you doing?" Drew stepped onto the stage beside Willow. "I've spent weeks investigating financial irregularities connected to several city contracts," he continued. "At first, I thought it was just sloppy bookkeeping." He opened the folder. But the deeper I looked, the clearer the pattern became. The reporters leaned closer. Inside the folder were documents, financial transfers, donation records, and bank statements. These records show that Willow accepted hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations, Drew explained. Not directly, but through shell organizations designed to hide the source. The crowd erupted into shocked whispers. Willow's face paled. "That's absurd," she snapped. "Political campaigns receive donations all the time." "Yes," Drew replied calmly, "but not in exchange for influence." He held up another document. These organizations were tied to companies seeking city development contracts. In return for those donations, city funding was quietly redirected toward their projects. Gasps rippled through the square. Michael stared at Willow, disbelief written across his face. "Tell me this isn't true," he said quietly. Willow's mind raced. She had prepared for many scenarios during her campaign, criticism, protests, even political attacks. But she had never expected this moment. Especially not today. Especially not from Drew. "It's all speculation," Willow insisted, trying to regain control. "There's no proof that I personally benefited." "That's where you're wrong." Drew pulled out the final document. "This account," he said, pointing at the page, "was opened under a charitable foundation name. But the signatory authorization belongs to you." The silence was deafening. Even the wind seemed to stop. Michael slowly turned toward Willow again. "Willow," he whispered. Her confidence crumbled. For the first time since stepping onto the stage, she had no response. Across the square, sirens suddenly echoed. 2 police vehicles pulled up near the barricades. Officers stepped out, moving steadily toward the stage. The ceremony that had begun with hope now felt like the scene of a crime. Willow's breathing became shallow. "This is insane," she muttered. "You're destroying everything over lies." Drew shook his head sadly. "No," he said. "The lies were already there." The officers climbed the steps. One of them addressed Willow directly. "Ma'am, we need you to come with us." The words hung in the air like a final verdict. Michael stepped forward desperately. "Willow, please just tell me the truth." She looked at him. The crowd watched closely. For a moment, it seemed like she might fight back, might deny everything again. But she didn't. Her silence said everything. Michael staggered backward slightly, devastated. "You did it," he whispered. Willow closed her eyes. The officers gently took hold of her arms. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed relentlessly. As Willow was escorted down the steps of City Hall, the inauguration banners fluttered above, silent reminders of the celebration that had turned into catastrophe. The crowd parted as the police led her away. Some people looked shocked. Others looked angry. But many simply looked exhausted, as if they had seen too many scandals unfold in their beloved city. Back near the barricade, Scout stood quietly. Her hands trembled, but Drew knelt beside her. "You were very brave," he told her gently. Scout looked uncertain. "Did I do the right thing?" Drew nodded. "The truth is always the right thing." Nearby, Michael remained frozen in place. His world had just collapsed. Everything he believed about Willow, her integrity, her compassion, her vision for Port Charles had shattered in a single moment. The police car door closed. Sirens faded as the vehicles drove away. Reporters immediately began broadcasting the breaking news across the country. What was supposed to be the proud inauguration of Port Charles's newest mayor had become one of the most shocking political scandals in the city's history. By evening, investigators had already launched a full financial inquiry. The records Drew revealed were only the beginning. Officials began examining city contracts, charitable foundations, and campaign funding trails. Each new discovery suggested the corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined. For the citizens of Port Charles, the day would never be forgotten. Not as a celebration, but as the day the truth came crashing down. And at the center of it all was a young girl who refused to stay silent. Scout's courage had sparked the moment that exposed the corruption hiding behind promises of reform. As the sun set over Port Charles, the city faced an uncertain future once again. But for the first time in a long time, many residents believed something important had finally happened. The truth had won.